When times are uncertain and you're full of doubt, COVID runs rampant, so cover your mouth. You can't go outside, there's no easy way out, but there's a place you can go. Mr. What Drinks COVID Classroom, Mr. What Drinks COVID Classroom, Mr. What Drinks COVID Class, Mr. What Drinks COVID Classroom, Mr. What Drinks COVID Classroom, Mr. What Drinks COVID Classroom, Mr. What Drinks COVID Classroom. Whoa! That's for you. You may have not wanted it, probably, but that's for intercultural, for my favorite students this semester. I hope you're doing well. My hair, Emily would not be happy with me right now if she was here. Again, doing it this way, straight, direct, simple, save you time, save me time, and to just get to the meat and potatoes. So let's do it. First things first, I graded your papers, and a lot of us missed the mark on those. I don't know if the effort wasn't there, or maybe confused about what to do, but it just looked like, and that it just doesn't apply to every single one of you, but a lot of us just hastily kind of threw something together, and the papers, a lot of them feel like they have no thesis. They have no point almost. It's like, I did this just to get it done. And I get that. I asked you to do a paper. I know that. So read my comments on Blackboard, and I'm going to give all of you, if you want to read my comments and then ask me questions, about what can I do to make it a better paper, or if you want, a 50 out of 50, you can rewrite that paper. Realistically, think about how long it took you, and know maybe double that time, and go back and rewrite it and boost your grade. I'm going to give you the opportunity to do that, but I think a lot of us just missed the mark there and didn't really think about what we wanted to write about. It was just kind of like, okay, I know this is due, so I'm going to get it done. And I didn't expect that from you, honestly. And if what I'm saying, you're like, what? Then that doesn't apply to you. But some of you, I'm sure it will connect. And as I said, I'm going to give you the opportunity to go back and make that change. So if you have questions, email me. But hopefully my comment will help get you on the right track. So real quick, I want to talk about the last chapter of our book. Believe it or not, we're there. Chapter 12, okay? How can we become ethical intercultural communicators? And this is a really interesting chapter, because what can happen to us, and what I've seen happen to me over the years, is I learn something, right? I learn a concept, I understand an ideology, a way of viewing the world, and I think all of a sudden I know everything, right? And I'm like, oh, I can apply this to everything. And it's my job to tell everybody what my view is, and they should kind of understand that I'm right? I'm on the correct side of things. And you all know, are beginning to understand at least, that obviously that's not always true, and we need to stop ourselves when we can from that. And it's difficult because we're playing with our ego at that point. So let me just mention 3 things that stood out to me, and then we'll kind of talk about what I expect for Thursday. So again, just the idea of universalism, and not like universalism as in everybody's going to be saved in the end. That's like a Christian, well, not always Christian, but an idea anyway of salvation. I'm getting off track. Universalism, consistent rules should apply to all individuals. So if this is prohibited here, it should be prohibited there. Yes, those people have a different culture and aren't like us, but they should learn to be like us because particularism, not easy to say, context and other factors come into play when judging people. That kind of seems more on track. But shouldn't there be certain things that are universal? Should we allow a culture that says murder is okay? Probably not, right? That's what we think. It's really hard for us to get out of that. So they talk about ethical relativism and ethical absolutism, and this links with those things. So ethical relativism is the importance of understanding the cultural context in which the problematic conduct is being judged. So there's an issue at hand, but you understand that in that culture, perhaps it's a non-issue. So you look at like Saudi Arabia, let's say, and a man has 7 wives. Okay, what gut instinct comes to you? Why? Is that a problem? Well, if he's abusing his wives, we would say yes. Well, I can extend that. He has 7 wives, so there's probably emotional abuse, right? There's one favorite. There's somebody getting ignored. Again, I'm applying our ideas, our cultural ideas to that. So it gets really complex, right? That's relativism, though. It's like understanding culturally the differences there. And then ethical absolutism is you apply, that's like universalism. You apply one set of consistent standards that should guide human behavior on a universal level. And I made a note here on page, here's the problem with that. Page 257. Unfortunately, the dominant or mainstream culture typically defines and dominates the criteria by which ethical behavior is evaluated. All right? So think about how the dominant culture in the United States at one time, the dominant culture, the people in charge, thought slavery was okay. Right? So how can we ever come to the conclusion that currently right now our ethics as a westernized culture are absolute, are unchanging, are perfected? And maybe we don't think that, but we can still think that, like, well, in westernized society we do these things, and having multiple wives is looked down upon. So that means in other cultures, we should encourage them not to have multiple wives because it can lead to issues A, B, C, D. But that's the dominant view that we have that we can't sometimes get out of. Okay, and I'm not a polygamist. But just trying to do those mental gymnastics there and kind of think through those issues. And this is all like, it's mental gymnastics. We're just thinking about things. What's really important to us, to you and me, is maybe knowing and understanding these things, but realizing we can only apply them in very certain and specific situations, right? Like daily, we aren't going to think about these things. And that's something I've come to the conclusion of recently. It's like, well, we can have all these ideas and ideologies, but in our day-to-day lives, how are those affecting our actions, right? It may not be as important as we think. And that's not to say like thinking's not important, and theorizing's not important. But think about what you do in your everyday life, when it comes to these ideas. And then the last thing I want to talk about that I think is really good for us to start to learn, page 262, parallel thinking. Right? And in here it says, substituting any global or local event with people in your connected in-group, friends, family, etc., or intimate network, then cross-checking whether you would still arrive at a similar attribution process or a similar emotional reaction. Okay, so this is basically empathy, right? The difference between empathy and sympathy is if somebody falls down a hole, sympathy is, oh, that I'm so sorry you fell down that hole. That really stinks. Right? Oh, that's bad for you. That's sympathy. I feel sorry for you. Empathy is mentally or perhaps even physically jumping down into the hole with that person, right? Purposely putting yourselves or someone who belongs to your in group in the story of another. So maybe when you're thinking about polygamy, say if you're against that, what if it's your brother now or your uncle who has multiple wives and you have multiple conversations with him? How does that change your idea of it? Well, my uncle's kind of a good guy maybe, and all his wives seem pretty happy, and I've talked to them and perhaps they're hiding their true feelings from me, but it doesn't seem that bad, right? So it changes. Again, it's having true personal experience with something instead of theorizing about it. And this can really help curb that biggest problem that we talked about, which is ethnocentrism, right? If you want that to be curbed. You can live in a world where you think you have the way. I'm not going to condemn you for that. I'm not going to say that's wrong, because that's a good strategy for getting through this life, is like finding something that these are my universal values. That's what I'm going to stick to. The problem is when you try to apply those to everybody, right? You throw a really wide net and it often doesn't work. So think about why you jump to conclusions, right? When you think about something. I want you to all do this. I want to talk about it on Thursday. Write down what and who has formed you. And what I mean by that is think about your childhood. Think about who you were surrounded by. Did you go to church? If so, what was it like? Did you resist that? Did you accept that? Why do you think that's the case? Again, this is more mental work here. But then that can come to matter because, for example, so I was in a period of like really pushing and wanting like really leftist ideology economically, which that just means like more toward communism essentially. I wouldn't now consider myself a hopeful communist or Marxist because I don't think that's possible in our current day. But so I like follow those groups on Twitter, and I remember one day they posted something that was like, let's fight for health coverage and insurance for sex workers, and let's make it legal across the United States. And instantly I was like, oh, nope, I don't agree with that at all. And I was like, I can't align myself with these groups anymore because that just pushed me the wrong way. Why? Well, because of Christian values, because of the fact that I don't see promiscuous sex as valuable, etc., etc. So, but then, right, so I was in that headspace, and then a student of mine, for his persuasive speech, talked about how we should and perhaps could legalize prostitution and how that would bring down violence against all these women who are trying to make a living, and perhaps you see that having sex with random strangers as a moral issue. But it just kind of changed my idea about the whole thing, right? So now I'm kind of, again, day to day, does that have any effect on what I do? Like, am I going out and picketing and standing with all these prostitutes on Independence Avenue? Because I just happen to live near a street that has a lot of prostitutes. It's like, no, but if it ever comes to the forefront and there's a ballot, then at least I have something to pull from and say, well, I have kind of thought about this, and now instead of my gut reaction, I have a bit more to think about, right? So I know that was long, but I just want you to think about like why you are in the current headspace you're in with certain ideologies and ethics and values, and how we can talk about that and why that's beneficial for us, why that can be advantageous to us, but how it can also get us in trouble the more we go through life and the more we meet people not like us. Okay? So that's kind of my 2 cents on the chapter. I know I jumped around a little bit. And let me just double check. So we're headed toward, right? The next week is like finals week, and we already talked about when our subculture share is due. But allow me to remind you now that you're here. So remember, 5 to 7 minute speech. We're doing that next Tuesday, so a week from tomorrow on Zoom. This Thursday is our last like group gathering talking about chapter 12, and any other questions you may have, we'll kind of just open it up. If you want to know anything about each other, right, we can ask each other questions, or just a good time to reflect. You can ask me any questions. Basically anything and everything's on the table, because I trust you all. And like I said, I've had a really good semester with you. I wish we could have done more in the classroom and been together more, but we're just prevented, obviously, from doing that. So I hope this chapter means something to you. I hope this book has done something for you. This class has done something for you. And if you don't think it has, I want you to ask yourself maybe why, and start thinking about what I could have done better or what you could have done better to change the experience. So that's all I have for now. This was a bit more long-winded than I expected, but this is it. This is the last lecture video. So thank you all for being here. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you all on Thursday.